Hi, Richie.
How are you?
I'm swell.
Hi, folks. We're all swell right now because you know why? We're gonna get ready for tomorrow's NOSTAGAIN Frames of Reference Symposium and Research Creation Expo at the Fourth Space on Friday 13th. Today, though, we're just setting up. And Elliot is one of our artists for the Research Creation Expo. If you could just sort of maybe introduce yourself briefly, sort of what's your discipline, where'd you come from, and then maybe introduce us your work and we can talk about it as it goes.
I'm Elliot Stocking. I'm a second-year undergraduate in the sculpture department. My work is kind of like this place where handicraft and extensive process meets themes of queerness, nostalgia, and alternity, kind of. Yeah, so I do a lot of textile work, like crochet, I do beading, wood carving, anything that takes ages and I do with my hands.
Wow, all by your hands?
Yes.
One thing that I've really noticed from your work here, which is titled Cold Comfort, Warm Grief, is that sort of division, right? And there's a juxtaposition within calling sort of comfort cold, right? And also grief being warm. But also within your material itself, right? That there is just wood carvings that you do by hand and by memory, but also this sort of crocheting that you do. And if you could just talk us a little bit about what inspired each of these actualizations, what do they represent, and maybe just speak to the tensions of sort of why did you choose these forms to capture something so lively like nostalgia and memory?
So the textile component is like, it's drawing on references of maps and tapestry. So the material and like sort of the process and the idea of like a documented space is like very traditional to tapestry, but then by placing it on a table, it moves into this sort of map utilitarian space. And the process of crocheting too is like this constant looping back on itself, which I think really helps to like by like creating a space from a subjective memory thing. I don't know. I'm
Just as a well that you draw from, right?
Yeah, or just like a reclamation of a space because you're making it.
I'm curious as well, as you're sort of doing this labor of love, right? We did talk earlier. You did this from memory, right? So like the things that you've carved, they're items that represent sort of what you think about when you think of home, but also this entire map, right? This blueprint represents sort of a top-down map of your own home that you grew up in. Just sort of maybe talk us a little bit about who these refer to and where home is geographically, you know, and how has that been, you know, sort of revisiting that out in this form?
Yeah, so this is an architectural style map of the home I grew up in.
Yes.
Which is an apartment in Toronto. And yeah, it was drawn entirely from memory, so it's quite distorted. One of the things I noticed after making it was I made my room bigger than my brother's.
Don't we all want that?
Yeah. So a little bit of wishful thinking going on.
Yeah.
And also all these like gaps, like these black blocks of in the architectural mapping that they reference like a concrete block. But I don't actually know that those are there. They only exist because I'm trying to remember like the relation between the rooms in the space. Yeah, and as for the objects, they're each sort of representative of a room, kind of drawing on the map theme again. I was thinking about tabletop role-playing games and the map, the role of the map in those, and the idea of like a token. So these are all like, I want people to touch them, hold them, to move them. Yeah.
If we have a look, that's a wee remote. And you said you did this just by feel and memory.
Yeah, so I looked at a picture of a Wii remote and...
My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, right? The B button?
Yeah, a lot of... In my practice generally, and like with the objects specifically, there's like... I try to do this like failed mimesis thing where I know I'm not representing something accurately, but that's kind of the point.
And it's very freeing in that sense.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
another question as well before we move on to the next. Can you just talk very briefly about this overlay that you've made using film, what it's about, and sort of why that complements with the map and the wooden carvings you've made of the tokens?
So the only like room that doesn't have a corresponding object are the bathrooms and the living room. So I wanted to represent the living room, which is like this amorphous, not defined space where a lot of communal events happen. So this is an overlay of footage from my living room in this apartment from my childhood. And yeah, you can't hear the audio, but I kind of, I muted parts of each video so that these like lines kind of emerge, giving it more of like a movie feeling.
For sure.
And then playing with like saturation and color burn in the way that they overlay to make this weird, cloudy, muddy memory space.
And that's as rose tinted as a film image can be, really. If folks want to sort of hear more about your work, where can they sort of follow you? Is there anywhere we can, or maybe just refer to NOSTAGAIN and we could sort of promote your work from there?
Yeah, I mean, I have an Instagram account that you can follow that I'm not good at posting at. You can also just find me, email me.
Do you have an email or an account?
Elliot.stalking@gmail.com. I like talking to people. Whoa.
So does the TV. You want to hear more about that? You can catch our live stream, which is happening on the Fourth Space YouTube channel, because we're showcasing Elliot's film at the start of the third panel. Nostalgia is where you make it. Thank you so much, Elliot. See you later. Hi, folks. Welcome back. Here I am with Vanessa Randall, right? Here we are again at the Research Creation Expo at NOSTAGAIN's Frame of Reference Symposium and RC Expo on February 13th at Concordia University's Fourth Space. Here we are on the install day, right? Van, can you maybe take us through what Work in Situ, the modern woolen mill face enclosure, is about? Sort of where did this come from before we even see what's on the table? Where did this idea originate from?
Well, I think the idea originated from when I was working, actually, in a place. And this place is located in Estrie, Quebec. And I found out that it used to be a woolen mill. So I was really fascinated by the history of woolen mills. And coincidentally, I found out that the town that I grew up in was really close to a woolen mill that was one of the last mills before they closed in Maine, and they made like high-end fabrics for fashion, but also interiors and biliary cloth. And so they were just one of these really important employers for the region. So. And my father had worked there for a short period of time. I also found out through this. So it's interesting when you get really interested in a topic, what you find that you don't
So
know.
it's a sort of this wooden mill, right? It's not just something that's important to your town, but also within your family as well. How did you find out about where you worked at, the fact that it used to be a wooden mill? Was it sort of by word of mouth, or was it by archives, or how did you get across that news?
I think I was working, it was a spinning mill, so they were still in the textile industry.
Yes, of course.
But, so I found out through my colleagues, actually, that they told me that used to be a woolen mill. So I already kind of casually interviewed them while I was working there.
Yep.
And so I wanted to go through it in a more formal way and like dig deeper into like not only the history, but kind of like the sense of place and kind of the visual. It was kind of like a nostalgia, honestly, because I was there in the workplace, and there were remnants of the woolen mill still. They had like the old Toledo weigh machine. There were still like the dyes that were there, and I just thought that would be really interesting to just bring this back in a way. I know there were issues with the textile mills in the past. So don't want to ignore that, but I was really interested in what people thought about working in the woolen mill and what they missed about that experience. So
Perhaps if you can take us through maybe one of these panels, and maybe if whatever you recall, sort of what do these panels represent in terms of one of the interviewees you talked to? Just curious.
Right. So, so I guess this one here was the mill that I worked in. It was a spinning mill, which used to be the woolen mill. And so I really, have a lived sense of the place already. And I had heard that a long time ago they had dumped the dye water into the river that next to the mill. So, but what I learned through my interviews was that they the town and the mill put a lot of work into a water purification and filtration system, so that it was no longer affecting the waterways. So that's why I included this motif of like a fish bones, because it kind of still like pays homage to like the the effects that the textile industry had in the environment. But I also wanted to like create kind of a lively sense of there's still life in the river, so there's like some schools of fish.
And it looks like a leaf too, actually.
Yeah,
from this angle.
It could be interpreted in many ways. This is an island that's next to the mill, so it's in a way from this image I got from Google Earth of the island, and then this is based on an insurance map, which is still was one of the remnants of the woolen mill in the spinning mill, so that's still there. So I was able to like kind of overlay several different sources for my maps. So it's not just based on the interviews; it's based on insurance maps. This is based on a hand-drawn map that one of my interviewees did of the mill in Maine, and I also use Google Earth to get you can go back in time with Google Earth, but the pixel quality, like it's not as clear. Since like 2000, when the mills closed. These two mills closed in around 2000 to 2004. Yeah. So that's kind of when Google Earth was starting to improve their...
26 years ago.
Yeah.
What I think a lot of people can appreciate in your work is how you sort of mend things that don't seem to mix together. So for example, you talk about sort of the afterlives of these mills and sort of the residual machines that are in there, so rusty, old, large, huge, yet you're able to communicate it so sort of fluidly. Right? And you use sort of these remnants, like these internet records and even insurance maps, and you're able to put it all into this sort of warm-ish, really blanketing feel. I'm just curious, just one last question before we move on to the next artist. What has been a surprising thing from this method? When you were interviewing them, did you collect all interviews and you just went for making a panel, or you made them as you interviewed them? What surprised you in the process?
I wanted the research creation to be done as, research for creation. So I started with the research and these the legends next to the maps, which if you come into the space, you can look at the themes, the data analysis that I had done through phenomenological analysis of the interviews, and so. The trick was to represent the themes by color. So each color kind of there's a dominant color in each map, which relates to the dominant theme. Yes. However, I didn't want it to feel like a data visualization. I wanted it to be more organic and also be interpretive, include some pictorial elements as well as the map, the insurance maps, and it's my interpretation of their experience working in the specific place, but I also have my own experiences of the place, so I felt like that I was well situated to do this work.
And we're very much in situ of your thinking. Just one last question. If folks want to learn more about your work, is there sort of an Instagram handle, a website, or somewhere we can find you at, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. So in the beginning of this research, I created a website for the research project called woolroots.com.
Woolroots.com.
Yeah. So, no S, though. Yeah.
Woolroot.com.
Yeah. So I can definitely, include that on the display for people to go. And that will actually tell people a lot more about the project and include some pictures of the mills that I found in the region, which I'm calling the Maritime Peninsula. So there's sort of a transnational or cross-border relation between the mill that I'm also going to be thinking about through the research.
So much to unpack here. Woolroot.com. Thank you so much, Van. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So welcome back. This is one of the other research creation artists at NOSTAGAIN's Frame of Reference, Nostalgia Symposium, and RC Expo at the Fourth Space at Concordia University, Friday 13th. I'm now standing next to Emilie. Hi, Emilie.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I just have a question, Emilie, before we get started. Sort of, if you can introduce yourself, sort of your discipline, what you've been doing at Concordia for a while, and then we can get into sort of what you've done.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm. My name is Emilie Kvist. I am an MFA student in the print media department. That's my stream, print media in fine arts. So I'm just finishing. I'm graduating in the June. I'll be all done.
Congratulations.
And this work is actually a snippet from my thesis show that happened in the fall. My practice, I'm really interested in bits of pieces of ephemera that people leave behind. This kind of stemmed back, starting more, been doing this work since 2021 on these themes actually. Inspired by finding bits of photographs from my grandmother's collections, but then a lot of them were unnamed people.
Oh, okay.
And so finding them and being oh, these are important, and the significance of people's bits and pieces when they pass away, and the feelings we have around that. And so I've been working with themes around that for a while. Yeah.
That's awesome. And this piece in particular here is called The View from the Side.
Yeah.
Just maybe take us through what that means, and maybe, you can also let folks at home see as well as you talk through it.
Yeah, so The View from the Side, they're inspired by finding bits and pieces of ephemera of lost archives. This was from more when I found somebody's entire slide collection at the Renaissance bins, and I collect up all of the little pieces. And so they're slides, but each one is also a book in itself. So they have a book and a zine format here as well, and then individual slides. So people can go through, and each slide is different. And the idea is that then people can kind of experience what it's like to go through slide carousels.
Yes.
But each one is also a book.
Yes.
The idea behind this is gives people the option to go through the slides, but also I'm thinking a lot about how we use different technologies of a couple generations ago, and how that is how we access bits of memory and archive. These are kind of created archives as a sense. So each one kind of has thoughts and ideas about what, mostly my thoughts and ideas, honestly, about the feelings that I have when I find bits of people's archives. And I often find little bundles, and I've been started to be given bundles of people's archives. So I tend to steward these archives now. I often use distortion as a way to I would say protect people's identities, and things like that. So using bits of traces. I'm interested in trying to use the translation of print media into things like books or sculptures or installation in ways in which then the primary objects themselves are never harmed. So I steward the primary objects themselves, and I often do writing about them.
Yes.
And then I use print media as a translation into my work.
You've touched on something that's really that a lot of us, whether or not we use analog or digital media, sort of hold dear, which is sort of that ethics of care, right? That sort of, despite our phones having billions of photos of the same day, or these sort of slide decks that are just, one photo for one particular year or something, we all take great pride in sort of curating that, right? Selecting it. What's interesting about your collection here, as you've just mentioned, is that it's from folks that you may not know who they are, and not their entire sort of context, right?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, within this particular medium itself, what has been surprising for you? Do you feel sort of secondhand nostalgia when you're going through a person's story? Or do you feel, I want to learn more, but I can't because... How'd you wrestle through that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. It stems back from also finding photo ephemera that we also didn't know of my grandma's generation. Yes. So I think it's they kind of become I'm stewarding people that feel kin to my own kin in some kind of ways. So and I try to research, and I feel very nostalgic for those times, and researching bits and pieces of their lives. But there's definitely only so much that you can dive into, because the person themselves or the family themselves that would know more, or the writing is just like not enough. Like sometimes you're like writing, like for example there'd be like Marshall and me is like one of them, so like a lot of the text here, like this would be like Marshall and like me, but like who is Marshall and who is me, and there's, without a last name, there's like not enough information to really like give a full breadth into those people's like lives and story. So there's a point when it does like kind of fall short, but you're trying to like still like do this level of caring and stewarding these bits of ephemera. I think there's also a part of it that is a realization that like I am also on this same journey in life, that like there's like I think a kind of existentially crisisy or not, right, about that like inevitably like, you know, someone might find bits of my archive one day, and like that's kind of okay. And there's like a material quality that I really like to finding things, because it feels very personal, in a way in which like digital archives, although I am interested, like I am distorting through digital scanning and things like that often. There's something very lovely about the material and holding an object in your own hand and like feeling the paper and think like somebody else, maybe this exact person like held this thing that I held, that I'm holding right now. Like this one, for example, says like, I imagine your friends and family looking through these slides, like the same way that like I would look through these slides. I think there's one of my favorite ones. Like here, like I also worked in a cemetery for a while. So like this one says like, I wonder what your name was. I would read your obituary. And so like sometimes I do find like people's ephemera, and then I do go and like read about them through online and like trying to figure out the bits of pieces. One really interesting collection that I found recently was like one in which was like a whole little time capsule into this family farm that was in BC. That's because I'm from BC. So this is where I picked up this collection. And then like when you flip over some of the photographs, like just had the address on the back of the farm, and you look that address up and it does not exist anymore. It's only parking lots. So like these are kind of like these like windows, and I'm looking at it from my side, but they're also looking from their side, and they're like little portals. So hope I answered some of your questions.
No, it was fantastic. Sort of what I love, as just as a final note about your work and your practice, is that it's very cognizant, right? It's sort of through this obscurity, but also precariousness of moments. You going through it, realizing that, what about my archives, right? It's a sort of a jolt moment for folks, I'm sure, tomorrow to be like, well, what's my archive for tomorrow? What's my snapshot and slide deck, my best bits? Right? We tend to have sort of Spotify top 10s or Instagram reels that represent our years, but we don't very much think about what's the view on the other side of the person seeing it. Just curious, before we move on, where can folks learn more about your work? Is there sort of an Instagram handle or website?
For sure. Yeah, definitely. So my Instagram handle is my first name, last name. So Emilie Kvist _art. My website is emiliekvist.com, so you can find more there. I'm currently rebuilding the whole thing, but you can still access it. And on there, you'll also find more about like my other projects. I'm really involved in community projects as well, so you can read more about that. That's about it. And
if folks didn't catch that, we can always link that at NOSTAGAIN or the Fourth Space event page as well. Thank you so much, Emilie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Hey folks, welcome back to another one of our research creation artists. Melanie, nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And this is your work, Soft-Excavation, Di-Kilala, at Frame of Reference, Nostalgia Symposium and Research Creation Expo, happening at the Fourth Space, Concordia University, February 13th, 2026. Melanie, just maybe briefly let folks at home know sort of what's your discipline, where do you come from as an artist, and what's your favorite material to work with, if there's one?
So hi, bonjour, hi. My name is Melanie Garcia, she, her. I'm currently a second-year MFA student in print media in the Studio Arts program. My favorite media to work with, I guess. I've really been into like printing on textiles, as you can see. So that would probably be where I'm going for. And I only learned how to screen print last year.
How's it been?
It's been great. I feel it's kind of like a new, even if I'm in the print media program, it's like I'm not a master printer, so I really approach printing as just another tool in my arsenal, and like kind of not as like something to perfect, but actually to incorporate whatever the medium and the process shows us.
And I'm sure a lot of folks at home, including myself, have a respect for print masters because we all know how difficult printers are to work with. Different kind of printing. Not sponsored by Epson. So if you could just take us through, and maybe Jax can come closer, sort of what's the rationale behind this representation? I mean, you talked a little bit about the figure, right? That you've
Yes.
sort of displaced.
Yes.
Just the different layers I see here, the tears.
Yes.
However you want, just take us through it.
Yeah, sure. So this piece is kind of like, basically my practice is looking at like archives, like family archives. So
Yeah.
this is from a family photo, and my family is from the Philippines. I was born and raised here in Jojage, and and using this this abaca plant as like a symbol to represent not only this idea of exoticism or like a faraway place, but the abaca as like a motif and a material that's kind of been popping up as a symbol to hinge onto, kind of trying to express this idea of a place that I've never been to, and like how do I create a connection
Yes.
to it.
Yeah.
And like the figure who's like obscured here is someone I've never met or never known, and like kind of like like saying that this idea of this family history is something that I will never like fully understand or connect. Well, I'm trying to connect with. So underneath we can like lift the curtain if you want.
wow.
It is a screen print on paper, and then layered on top of it is the exact same image on this open weave cotton, and which I've picked out a bit, kind of like this erosion of the image itself and this figure on top, and then there's like this extra layer here. I kind of like am really interested in like spaces and like what's in between these layers, and like how do we gain like a sense of like knowledge or place through that.
That's quite interesting that you sort of chose the plant as a motif, other than the fact that it's sort of representing the exoticism. I'm from Thailand, so for us it's like durian fruit or coconuts, right?
Yes.
But you mentioned something that caught my attention, which is you've never been, right? And how do you sort of reconcile with that part of your upbringing? Is it for secondhand stories, archives?
This is literally like what I'm hinging my whole MFA on.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, this idea of like a distance, and being like, am I culturally enough, and like, sorry, like I don't speak the language, and kind of like, how do I latch on to whether it's family stories or family archives or even this idea of this plant to create that connection. And like the more I read about, let's say, for example, the abaca plant, the more I feel like I'm learning like more about like this plant as like an export plant and like pre-war, and then now it's like really used in like a lot of handmade processes, like for like fine art paper making and
or
all
tourism
that.
too, or like sort of
Or
like
like
instrumental version.
Yeah, and it was like the manila paper is
Yes.
like the abaca. Anyways.
But the motif of the plant, especially as you're trying to sort of uncover, right? Soft-excavate, uncover.
I am softly excavating.
What you're doing. And I love how you've sort of given us this white space here, that there's more than meets the eye, right? At the top, it's this huge plant that's sort of, it's a coconut plant for tourists. It's an abaca plant for manila paper, right? But underneath, the roots are so much deeper. Sort of, I'm curious for artists who are perhaps new to this kind of medium, what's been an interesting process for you to think about your own history, your own biography through this medium? What sort of helped you realize that, the labor, the layering?
Yeah, I think layering is like, especially in a lot of diasporic communities or like art making, there is that narrative of like opacity and layering, and like how much do we share and how much do we know, and what is accessible, what is not accessible to us.
Yes.
and even within our own families or histories, or the way in which we interact in public-facing spaces.
Yes.
And I think like my personal like interest in like if you're speaking to this like empty space or negative spaces, I think like it does represent this idea of like a void.
Yeah.
And like what is that void? That's not mine to answer. It's like different for everybody.
Yes.
And also like when we contemplate the void, what do we put in it or what do we take from it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a sort of impart, taking out, right? So go figure. Go figure indeed when we come back and see either tomorrow live, Friday 13th at the Fort Space, or through this playback on their YouTube channel. Melanie, if you could just maybe give us somewhere we can follow you. Sure. Perhaps there's like a website or an Instagram.
So my website is melaniegarcia.ca, and Instagram, because it's a very common name, _Melanie_Garcia. That's my Instagram handle.
And we'll put both of those down in the link below as well, where you find this video. Melanie, thank you so much. Let's see if we're all nostalgically cultural enough, right? So come and have a look. Thank you again.
Thanks so much.
That was awesome. I'm now standing next to Dr. Michael Iantorno, who was actually one of our first research creation artists, I think, 3-4 years ago?
I think the first year I was here with Alex Custodio, and we did a Game Boy camera photo booth. So we had like the little printer out, and people could have little photos of themselves taken on the Game Boy camera.
And now we have the reverse of that, which is to capture you, literally you, tomorrow if you're here, having a look at what Michael has created here, which he's titled Endless Winters. Michael, just briefly before we begin, can you let folks at home know sort of your background, what are you doing right now, just in your life, and perhaps your research interests?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually a Concordia graduated last year, and now I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Waterloo, where I study game industry labor, but I also study video game history. And part of what I do is hacking video games. And this has been something that I've been doing both in the university and as sort of independently as an artist over the last 15 years or so. It started in my undergrad.
And I think, if I'm not wrong, Earthbound, right?
Yes.
And the ROM hacking also started quite a while back as well in your formative years.
Yeah, in my undergrad, my senior project was hacking Earthbound, and I made a little hack called Hyperbound, which I didn't think much of at the time, but it was actually got a surprising amount of attention. It was in Toronto's Nuit Blanche Festival, also in that festival's formative years. And it was in Anna Anthropy's book, Rise of the Video Game Zinesters. Yes. And that actually gave me a lot of motivation to keep pursuing game design and game hacking, both as a hobby and professionally.
See, in research language, Michael is sort of a pillar of a research community. In colloquial language, you're old but gold.
Thank you, Richie.
I can say this because Michael's been around for a while. So, Michael, why don't you take us through sort of the process through this? Maybe you could talk about the Super Nintendo as well. Maybe let folks at home know what Earthbound is and what sort of led you to encapsulate and hack the way you did this visage that we see right now. What does that represent?
Yeah, sure. So the installation itself is really composed of a few main elements. One, this old CRT television. Two, this is actually my family's Super Nintendo. We got this for Christmas one year, and it's miraculously still functioning somehow. And really the centerpiece of it is this cartridge in the middle. It's a hacked cartridge of the Super Nintendo game Earthbound. And I chose Earthbound because I've been hacking it for a while, and I'm familiar with it. And also because there's a really vibrant hacking community that's grown around it, the PK hack community. That I'm a part of, and that kind of can help me out when I want to make a new project like this. So inside that cartridge, and I actually brought a little demo over here, is a basically modified game. So this is a copy of NHL 97 for the Super Nintendo, and what I've done to it is I've created my own custom ROM chip on it and used a modding kit from a company called Bucket Mouse to take this new ROM chip to replace the game's original ROM chip, and I've replaced it with a custom hacked version of Earthbound. And as you can see on screen, this hacked version basically takes away everything from the game, but the initial flyover, and it extends it into an hours-long flyover of a wintry terrain. And I kind of chose to do it this way because I'm looking for ways to enjoy Montreal winters a little bit more. As you can tell, it's very cold and very snowy outside. And I kind of wanted to create a bit of an anachronistic hack. So this is like a lo-fi study beats with a lo-fi visualization built in a game that was released when neither of those terms were really popular. So I actually want to turn this into an endlessly looping YouTube video at some point. But for now, you have to come to the symposium and see it for yourself.
So old, gold, and also a gold play button for you soon on YouTube. Just one thing that caught my attention was how you mentioned that the Super Nintendo was your family's,
yes.
Right? The case study that you got there, the hardware there, was also sort of in collaboration with the company. Was it Bucket Mouse?
Bucket Mouse, they make hobby boards for video game modders.
So Bucket Mouse, your own family's SCNS, as well as the vibrant community, the PK Hacking Forum. There's a lot of sort of social components,
yes.
right, into sort of the remaking of your nostalgia. Speaking of winter, it takes sort of a collective to keep warm. I'm curious for folks out there at home who are interested in sort of old Nintendo media, old analog media, perhaps video gaming, retro games, right? Sort of what would be a good advice you have for these researchers when they're trying to actualize and dig up the past as it was, sort of the struggles you found in terms of this research creation yourself, perhaps some tips and advice on how researchers can do that and not feel so faltered, because not everything is available anymore.
Well, I think like my main advice would be that, a lot of the research that we want to do is already being done by folks out there, informal archivists. I think Phil Salvador at the Video Game History Foundation calls them citizen archivists.
Yes.
And these folks often know more about these games and these consoles than researchers do. So I think a lot of our first job is like finding these communities, collaborating with them, and like documenting the knowledge that, quite frankly, they've already documented, but like kind of integrating it into academic research in various ways. So I can like look at video game hacking, I can look at this assemblage, and I can think about it in terms of creativity, like having fun ROM hacking games. I can think about it in more academic senses, like, this is, in a sense, appropriation. We're taking Nintendo's game, we're doing new things to it. There's some interesting legal aspects. Are you allowed to be making copies of this game and making changes to it? Perhaps Nintendo would say no, I would say yes. And like it's part of like these larger kind of like convergences of like fandom and interests online. So a lot of the stuff that we're studying, go online, see who's already studying it in various capacities and kind of start there.
So you're not alone, and pose for your mugshot for Nintendo. Michael, just before we wrap up, where can we find your research, both sort of more the academic sense, is there a website, a platform, and also what you're doing here in terms of the games as well?
You can check out my website. It's michaeliantorno.com. I also have an itch page that links from that website. And I'm on Blue Sky as well. You can just search my name.
And all that information will be posted where you see this video. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you, Richie.
I'm now with Marie Khediguian, who has joined us last year at Love and Loss, 1 year ago, and now we're back pretty much exactly at the same space. Marie, remind us sort of where you're coming from, sort of discipline-wise at Concordia, and what has happened in a year for you?
So I'm currently doing my BFA in painting and drawing.
Yep.
I have a background, though, in architecture, and I'm now exploring nostalgia through painting and how to connect between different people who seem very different communities through shared nostalgia. So the project that I'm presenting today is called Parallel Memories.
Yes.
And it was all kind of déclenché. I can't think of a good English word for it. Déclenché, like the catalyst of it was this painting, which I did last summer at the VAV residency, summer residency, where I basically took family archived photos of my mom and dad in their first few months of being here in Canada, immigrated from Egypt. And my dad was so pleased with having his own camera. He would take many photos of my mom everywhere. I like to joke that he was the OG Instagram husband before Instagram was a thing. And they also really loved having a car, which is something they never had access to. So they did a lot of road trips and took these really very interesting photos everywhere. And so I decided I wanted to kind of make a painting kind of celebrating that.
Yes.
which I noticed actually really connected with people from many different cultures. So for example, people from people like me, whose parents were immigrants and experiencing Canada for the first time, but also people who were Canadian originally or Quebecois originally, looking at these paintings and giving me a reaction that I hadn't gotten before, which was, oh, I really connect with this painting. I remember going as a child to a motel that had a pool and it was so fun. And that's where the seed was kind of put in, where I was like, okay, I can take my practice and make it bigger, and also maybe make something better, like the world better through art. And one way you could do that is by connecting people and making people realize that even if someone seems different, they have a different accent, they came from a different place, you still have shared memories. And shared joy, and that people are human, and reminding people that everybody is human no matter how different they are is just like this great way to start making community.
There's one thing that you talked about really brilliantly that stuck out to me, which is the fact that your parents came here and were embracing the future, right? Sort of a car for the first time, a camera for the first time. It's sort of the path, the Canadian dream, right? Yet through your painting, you're sort of looking back at the best bits of their past, right? I'm curious, we talked about this previously when we met as well, but when you were sort of trying to find out more about the locations that they were at, you had sort of sourced help from Facebook communities, right? Or you went online and asked folks about, hey, do you recognize this? Do you recognize that place? What has been sort of an interesting thing in this whole process, that instead of filling the painting with your memories or the colors that you mix, you're also relying on other people's recollections and their stories. How has that been the process for you?
Yeah, actually, that's like a really good thing that you mentioned. Thank you for reminding me, because it really underlines what I was thinking. So for this painting over here, I don't know if this one is my grandfather in front of a motel. And because my mom passed last year, she was the one that was she held all of the stories and the memories, and so I couldn't ask her details, but I do remember her talking about wildwoods, and I was like, maybe this is, and I saw on the back of the photo that I took inspiration from, it said New Jersey, but I couldn't figure out where in New Jersey was, and I remember her saying wildwoods. So I know on Facebook there are Facebook pages dedicated to, nostalgia and New Jersey nostalgia, particularly doo-wop, what they call doo-wop motels. And so I took the photo and I went on and I had this, it was such a lively discussion. I mean, these communities on Facebook are so active, and these people are so dedicated to this particular thing. It's such a niche thing, and it gets them so excited and happy. And they were like, oh, send me more photos. I was like, but none of the other photos have the motel in it. And they're like, it doesn't matter, just send it to me. And because of that, we were actually able to figure out which motel it was, because the original photo was cropped to here. And so I was able to take the actual photo of the motel, which was torn down, but I was able to manipulate it so that I could actually fill in the perspective and fill in the rest of the motel.
Yes.
And I found that interesting because it actually made a community. It made me feel like I belonged in that community. And those people that were mainly from the States and very, Anglophone and very majority here, they were asking me why I couldn't understand the writing on the back of the photo. And I showed it to them, and it's in Armenian, but it's phonetically spelled. So it could be misinterpreted. Yes. And so I feel like maybe I hopefully made them realize that, these immigrants that were so different from them also enjoyed what they love too. And so it was this really beautiful exchange, and I didn't get any negative feedback from it at all. Actually, it was super, super positive, and I was able to share the finished painting after, and everybody was very happy and excited. And so that was a really great story, and it felt like, in these days when we think of the internet and how horrible it can be, this is the best part of the internet. Yes. And it has happened a couple of times that things like that, where I'm like, oh man, I really wish I could find this. I'll go on Facebook, and there's this insane community that have these talents. archiving, of looking, of searching, of compiling that I don't have. And they help each other for no reason other than the joy of doing this kind of thing.
If there's one thing your whole journey has underscored, is that all of us are immigrants in the land of nostalgia, right? That all of us sort of want to help map out these memories, torn down or not. If we can sort of go over here and talk about your third and final canvas, and just maybe focus on color, right? Sort of, because I remember last year, if folks look back at Love and Loss, you said that when you're coloring things, I remember this very clearly, you put all of your colors and mix it on a singular panel or like a pane, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, the other two sort of had a sort of rose-tinted-esque color scheme, but what particularly about this one that you just finished today that made you want to bring it here? Can you tell us just briefly about this and what it resonates with you? Who is it? What is this capturing? What's a nostalgic thread around it?
So this is a picture of my brother on a coin-operated horse. And we have a couple of photos of him on these really cool 70s horses. And I thought it was, a lot of my art, honestly, is very instinctual. So it's hard for me to like put into words things that I'm doing visually. So sometimes it's more along the lines of just what feels right and what doesn't feel right. So when I was thinking about color for this one, I really loved that the horse was this golden color and the red, and I really kind of played off on that. So in the photo itself, the only things that are actually the color that you see here are his hat, which is the Expo hat, which is very nostalgic for a lot of people for the Montreal Expos, the horse, and then the rest of it was kind of, and the shopping cart handle. And then other than that, it was all me kind of playing with color to do something, right? So like the background, I wanted to push it back, and so I used more desaturated colors. And I also wanted to pull forward something, the actual horse and the person on the horse. And so when you use warm colors, those pull you forward. And they pop out, and you also have to think as a painter how you're not tricking someone, but it is magic, right? Like that's how I describe painting. It's magic, where you are using tricks of the mind and of the eyes to tell a story. And so for me, in this one in particular, and in a lot of my stuff, it's a diagonal path that I'm wanting people to take. And I'm doing that through perspective. I'm doing that through the careful choosing of colors. So the reds are starting down here, and then they go upwards and they stop here. So there's like a triangle going on, and there's like a diagonal, and it feels like the composition makes sense. And so, that's how, the front, honestly, this part was only decided what color would be like yesterday. And
instinctual?
It was instinctual, but it was also like I asked the opinion so sometimes I use Photoshop only just to like mask this certain area and then change the color to see what it looks like, just so that I don't end up mixing tons of paint and wasting a lot of paint or making it very muddy. And then I kind of shared both options, and I had people kind of weigh in. And the funny thing is, every time someone weighs in, I always go with whatever I think I'm going to do anyway. So like a lot of people said, you should make it blue, because the blue would be less, it would just push back that front part, and it was too bold. But instead what I did, I added a bit more blue to the red.
Okay.
So it did push it back a bit, but I felt like it needed that weight, and it needed to pin. And also I just detailed it more. So it looked a little less rough and therefore matched the rest of the painting. So, yes.
But what you've shown us, just as a sort of wrapping note as well, is that for folks who sort of offer opinions, whether you take it or incorporate or not, and folks who give you sort of really important information, for example, like the motel where it's been, there's always something parallel, right? That nostalgia takes a collective effort, for better or worse. It's not just one person only remembering and just doing it. There's so much layers and actors to it. Just curious, for folks who want to follow sort of your work, what's the best channel to find you? Instagram, website, etc.?
Well, I have a personal website, Khediguianart.com, but my Instagram is always very active, and I'm always having conversations there and wanting feedback. So that's marie.k.artist on Instagram. So you can find me there.
You can find those links wherever you find this video. Again, thank you so much, Marie, and see you soon! Welcome back, folks. My name is Richie. I'm with Killaq. We're now looking at the install day for Frames of Reference, Nostalgia Symposium and Research Creation Expo at Concordia University's 4th Space, happening February 13th, 2026. Killaq, thank you for being here. Just first and foremost, for folks who are watching this like retroactively, can you maybe give us sort of a primer of where'd you come from in terms of your discipline, your craft, who are you as a person, and your entry to nostalgia, just briefly?
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. My name is Killaq Enuaraq-Strauss. My name is Killaq Enuaraq-Strauss. I'm from Iqaluit Nunavut, but my mother's family is from Clyde River, also known as Kangturapik, and I am currently a creative writing student at Concordia. I am very deeply informed by my own oral histories and the traditions of Inuit storytelling, so all of my poetry, all of the work that I'm doing is very much rooted in trying to figure out how we can use creative writing and literature as a form of knowledge dissemination. So for us, traditionally, our stories weren't just about entertainment. They were about sharing philosophy, science, practical skills, all of that. So I'm kind of trying to figure out how to, reinvigorate that practice in new and creative ways.
And there's a sort of that Bildungsroman, or like the sort of myth and hero, right? Every story has to end a certain way with a victor. The expression history is written by the victors, right? That's the whole colonial nostalgia embedded. I'm just curious in terms of, let's look at one of your poems first. Nostalgia and Anemoa. Now, for folks at home who are unsure, right, Anemoa is quite a new term for a nostalgia you've never lived through. If you can take us through sort of why did you choose these two titles, and perhaps what do they try to convey in terms of disseminating your knowledge?
Absolutely. So Nostalgia is the poem on the left-hand side, and this is based on my family's actual history. And for me, it's still kind of Anemoa just because it's right before I was born. So technically I haven't experienced it, but these are the stories that I grew up hearing. And I really wanted to examine what it looks like to be nostalgic in a time of direct colonialism. So my mother is the first generation of people who were impacted by colonialism in our part of the Arctic. So I want to explore nostalgia, which, is a bittersweet thing. I wanted to kind of play with the idea of where does that bitterness come from? Where does that sweetness come from? Where is, what is the role of melancholy when you're actively still undergoing violence and trauma? But I also am really focused on desire-centered research. Yes. So I don't want to focus just on damage. There's a really interesting article, now I'm just going to nerd out a little bit, by Eve Tuck called Suspending Damage, that basically looks at how researchers interact with Indigenous communities. And it often leads to things like trauma porn and just the overhyping of the badness that we experience. So instead, I wanted to kind of have nostalgia alongside Anemoa, which is the future that I envision for Inuit and for my family specifically, had we never been impacted by colonialism within the so-called settler state of Canada. So Anemoa focuses less on my family's own history and more on our history as a people. So it starts with talking about Nuliayo, which is our main goddess, and she's kind of like who controls so much. And I really wanted to juxtapose that with directly starting nostalgia with the Bible verse, because Inuit have been colonized through the use of Christianity. And my family, I was raised in a very Anglican household. And I think it's really interesting to kind of show us the difference between what our traditional spirituality could look like versus how we're shaped today and the role that religion plays in nostalgia. I'd love to point to just a quick little passage here. So I think we should start, oh my goodness, it's so hard. Okay, we'll start at the beginning actually. And then I'm gonna skip a bit just because there's some interesting stuff I wanna look at. So it starts, just like Nuliayo, son of Angutta, my grandfather Juicy, son of Killaq, was swallowed by a great sea. Well, there is not one agreement over which grand tide swallowed our provider. We know that the water that ate Juicy was named Nuvorolok. So automatically I'm talking about a story. This is a direct thing that has happened to my grandfather. He almost drowned at one point. And then I move forward to here, and when being resuscitated, his chest was not pumped with vigor. Rather, he was laid on a rock, head turned to the east, Foam left dripping down his face. Only once the froth had trickled past his eyebrows did someone move to wipe it away. So the reason I included that was because it's an actual traditional practice of how to resuscitate somebody after drowning. And it's in direct comparison to when this happened, there was another person involved in the incident who a Western nurse had tried to resuscitate using CPR. So like chest was not pumped with vigor. And that person unfortunately passed away. Versus my grandfather, our teachings tell us if you lay somebody on a flat rock and then like watch the foam drip down their face, it tells you like once it passes the eyebrows, it's directly saying like this is how much water has passed through the lungs and this is how you know that he's actually going to make it.
Yes.
But what I also really enjoy about this is in Anamoya, what I do is I really slow things down. So by the time you get to this story, we're still related to how we started. We're still in the beginning versus over in Nostalgia. By the time you get there, we're like, time has passed significantly. We're at a new experience. We're at a new timeline. Other things have been going on. And I think that what is interesting to me is the passage of time within colonialism and how that impacts my own relationship with memory and melancholy. Because I find within a colonial society, everything is so fast-paced. We're supposed to move. You're never actually given a chance to sit with your feelings, to sit with your memories, to sit with the experiences that you have. Versus traditionally, I mean, I can't actually say for sure because unfortunately I wasn't there, but my family has mentioned how it was such a soft and gentle kind of way to experience time because things were still happening, things were still moving, and I can't say that it wasn't harsh and hard at times because it was, but there was more emphasis on slowing down and letting things happen naturally. And I think that that just like is how I myself try to have a relationship with, with the passage of time and with how I view my memories. And since moving over to this like more slowed down relationship, I find that I'm just more able to appreciate things. I'm not getting stuck in the past so much as I am allowing it to guide me towards a future where hopefully someday, you know, I can be telling these stories about my family, about our joys, about our successes, without having to juxtapose it against the injustice that has been faced. But yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm just wondering as a follow-up here, you said that writing is a very much sort of a way for you to slow down. It's a knowledge dissemination process. But in slowing down, what we're so used to writing as directive, writing as to the point, writing as pump 30 times, right? Yes. Here you sort of paint this really vivid moment that you're with them, right? That as a person who's not used to perhaps indigenous ways of knowing how one is drowning and surviving, I was holding my breath. I was like, why aren't you pumping? You know, I'm going on. I'm curious, when you were writing these two poems, especially one that is sort of present-based, right? The afterlives of colonial history and nostalgia, and one that could have been. Did you write all of these in one go, or did you sort of do a sort of asking elders, talking to people, going back? What was that like for you across these two poems, the writing process itself?
That's a great question. So I wrote Nostalgia first, and it's gone through many iterations. It was a bit longer previously, but I wrote that and then realized no matter how much I added to it, it felt incomplete. And I realized that that incompletion didn't come from, you know, I didn't need more lines, I didn't need more descriptives. I needed to give the alternative. I needed to give the option to have, you know, this joy, this resistance alongside that. So that's when Anamoya happened. And then this is actually kind of a mix of a few different poems. So the part that I shared about drowning is a much shorter poem that I wrote titled Drowning. I'm not great with titles. The creativity is not there for that. But yeah, so this is actually kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of different poems that I've thrown together that just have always been kind of centered on Inuk joy and Inuk tradition and storytelling practices. But I also think that writing allows me to slow down, but it's rooted in an oral history. Inuit didn't have a writing system before. So part of why you're telling the story so slowly, part of why it's supposed to be, you know, told again and again, is because that's how we remember it. You can't just read it and then have it at the back of your mind and go back and reread it. You need to hear it, you need to experience it, you need to interact with it multiple times before you're able to really understand and get the meaning out of it. So things like that, you know, I really try to slow it down and give people the option to like sit with it strongly. And another tool that I use for that is the rule of three.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where there's a lot of instances where you have, like, even the end of this poem, it ends with satisfied, satiated, sovereign.
Yes.
So I try to give these, like, almost quippy, like, quick, like, memorable things so that people, it stays in their mind. It's not something that just goes away immediately. It's like, I want poetry to stay in your brain. I want it to be in your head. I want it to be a song that is just, like, kind of on repeat. So yeah, there's a lot more that I could say about that.
Perhaps the Western English teachers would call it alliteration, right? But here we call it soul, right? Killaq, just for folks at home to know, if they would like to learn more about your work, either writing work or beyond, where can they find you? Perhaps is there a website, a platform, handle?
So currently, I've actually just taken down all of my stuff because there were some issues with AI and thievery.
Yes.
But if you're interested, if you're curious, I do have an Instagram account where I'll post things publicly pretty often.
Email, perhaps, if
yeah.
you're curious?
If you want to email me, that's fine too.
The email is?
My email is kenustra, KENUSTRA @gmail.com. And my Instagram handle is Enuaraq, ENUARAQ. And also, if you're curious, just feel free to come talk to me. I love talking about this stuff. I could talk forever about it. So, yeah.
And all of these links will be wherever you find this video. So don't worry, we got you there. Killaq, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm now here with Alexey. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for submitting to our symposium. Just maybe for folks who are tuning in as a sort of a teaser, can you sort of maybe introduce yourself? What's your discipline? Where are you based at institutionally? And how does nostalgia come into your practice, so to speak? However you want.
My name is Alexey Lazarev. I am a graduate student at Concordia University. I'm doing an MFA program. I'm in print department. However, I work multidisciplinary, so I work with different materials and methods. I come from painting and drawing, and been working with print for maybe over 10 years, and now kind of trying to find ways of incorporating these different approaches in my work.
Yes.
And to answer the question how nostalgia comes into my work, it's probably a bit of a complex question, but also not. I'm an immigrant. I came from Russia in 2012, so I've been here for 14 years now. And because of the political situation in the world at the moment, I cannot visit my home country, and it's been maybe 8 years now that I was unable to do so, and I kind of found myself thinking more and more about certain aspects of my childhood, and they started making their way into my work, maybe like not so consciously, but over the past couple years, I think it became like a little bit more prominent. Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned as well, sort of being able to convey your nostalgia, is that you said you come from originally a background of painting and drawing, but here we can see, you're working with metal, the plasma cutting, sort of why this change of medium, and the work itself is called soft to touch, which is kind of juxtaposed, especially what looks like a carpet. Yes, it's so rigid, right? It feels like home, but it does not, right? It's right there, but you cannot return. Can you maybe talk us through about how your themes of, becoming an immigrant here, not being able to go home, your ideas and feelings of nostalgia translate into the actual material itself? Just take us through that.
Yeah, I will answer kind of by like a series of answers, if it makes sense. So I come from painting and drawing, as I mentioned, and print, and now working with metal. It may seem like a very different medium. However, to me, it is not. Because to make this piece, I used drawing quite heavily. For this piece, I'm working with some of the designs of the tapestries that were very common in the Soviet Union in the 60s and 70s. And so this is something that I grew up with in the 80s and 90s. So I was able to find these designs on the internet and then trace them by hand. and I had to digitize it for this particular technique, plasma cutting. However, the drawing is still there. And one of the things I like about this method is that you can work with a handheld plasma torch, or you can work with a machine. However, even if you work with a machine, there is a lot of decisions that are made kind of in a very drawingly manner. The metal sheet itself, although I bent it, not necessarily for structural reasons, but mostly kind of like to convey some certain emotional I don't want to say feelings, like some emotions, or like maybe some feelings.
Yes.
But also metal has this relationship, like it can be, it has this relationship with painting and drawing. Metal sheet is not so different from a sheet of paper. So I see it as a surface that I can use to draw on.
Yes.
And also, I think important to mention that the connection to print, because of the way this work has been made. I had to use the same approach as we use in stencil technique, because if you see, like if I cut like a direct one continuous line, all the shapes are gonna just like fall and collapse. So I needed to use a stencil approach for structural reasons.
Yes.
Otherwise, the image would become it's not very legible to begin with, but it would become illegible to the point that I would not want that.
Yes.
So stencil technique is very present here as well, and so the ornament on the perimeter of this tapestry is traced from Soviet tapestries, and the central image, it's an image of a China rose plant, and this is something that was very present in the Soviet Union.
Yes.
My grandma used to have this giant plant that grew on a windowsill, and I just remember it very vividly. It has like a very specific red color that kind of like it just kind of stayed with me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very striking.
Yeah.
What I've loved about sort of the way you talk about metal is that it's a great sort of forum that, metal is, we think about as a conductor, right, of electricity, etc. But it's a great conductor here in the sense that it can translate your stencil background, right? It can translate the precision of the shapes that you want to form, the motifs you want to elicit. A lot of people say, nostalgia is very much rose-tinted glasses, but we tend to forget that rose-tinted glasses are made of thorns. Right, that's why it sticks and stays and hurts with you. And your use of metal, the zip wires here, right, tightening, constraining, that part of being able to convey and hold on to this message that you've had your grandmother's background, your Soviet relation, retroactively, your relationship now with Russia as your homeland, it's constrained, it's frozen in place. I do wonder if more people want to learn about this, Alexey. Where can they find your work? Is there a website, Instagram, etc., that they can look to, perhaps?
I post sometimes on Instagram. As I mentioned, I'm a graduate student, and life is very hectic, and sometimes we have periods when there is just no time to update social media. So even though there are periods when I'm a bit more active, there are periods when I don't update my work so much.
Email, perhaps?
I do. I try to post things like at least several times a month. I also have a website that is Alexey-Lazarev.com. I have some older works there. I will be updating my website maybe in the coming months.
And we'll just put all the links where you find this video, so don't worry about it. But
Okay,
thank you so much, Alexey, and can't wait to let you see this. Don't get thorned. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Alexey.
Richie.
I am now standing next to Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa. Enchanté. How are you? Vanessa, just maybe as a brief introduction to people who see this perhaps afterwards, can you let us know sort of where'd you come from discipline-wise?
Yes.
You know, your arts background, where are you at institutionally at the moment? And how does nostalgia briefly come into your work?
Okay. So I'm a communication student at UQAM. I'm doing a master's. Actually, I'm almost graduate, so I'm going to graduate in April. Yay! And I'm looking forward to continue at Concordia in the Indie program. I hope it works. And I'm interested in research creation. I've always been. I also worked in music licensing before. And so for me, nostalgia had a strong involvement in the work that I did there. And also smell. This is more something about smell here that you see. Because I was thinking about what triggers nostalgia for me. So music is one of them, and I'm going to have a laptop here with a playlist, and people are going to be able to add music and write down what memories, some songs that bring back memories. So that's one part. And then I was also curious about what are other things that just bring back nostalgia. And to me, smell is really something important and also super interesting because it's ephemeral but also permanent. So I thought there was something there to explore, and I also wanted to, based on what are the smells that bring memories for me, do these bring the same memories to other people? So based on that exercise, I brought some different kind of scent bottles here for people to smell, interact with, and write down, okay, what are you smelling? And what does it bring? What memory does it bring to you? It could be childhood, it could be really specific memories. I was chatting with friends about, you know, what kind of smell did your childhood was what smell did you did remind you of your childhood or your mother, your parents, things like that. So based on this research, I did this over here, and I added a bunch of little props from, you know, family photos, souvenirs that go together with some of the smells and the songs. So, yeah.
And I'm very curious, Vanessa, that was really good. You're here giving us not just a snapshot of your own, right, interaction with nostalgia. That's more than the usual, what would you say, 5 senses, right? Yeah. It's sort of the 6th sense is also sort of the personal assemblage, right, the making of the moment. For yourself here, you've given us different scents, different smells, different tactility touches, different materials. What for you here, as you were curating nostalgia scents, really struck with you? That you're like, ooh, that really hits for me. Did you have one? Or?
Yes. Strangely, it was actually more one that I had discussed with a friend. We were talking about what smell brought memories of her parents. And for that friend, the memory of his dad was actually from makeup because his dad was a clown. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And that triggered, okay, well, what are my, you know, memories from my dad? Is it, so I went with like some cigars for my dad, which is, and then, but it also, so it's my dad, but a specific period as well. So all of these are trying to trigger memories from a specific period, but also a feeling in general.
Of course.
So since nostalgia is about feeling. Yeah.
I love the fact that you've singled out the fact that different scents are also based on time and what people do, right? They're like time capsules. Like if somebody was nostalgic for Richie when he was a teenager, it'd be old pizza and Axe body spray, for example, right? It stinks. But now, Old Spice. For yourself, just as a final sort of follow-up, for people right now who are collecting things around their houses that they may or may not know or potential bottles, what has been sort of a good rule of thumb for you when you were collecting these items? What was helpful in your process for curation? You know, where did you lead with? Did you lead with the heart, the nose, the mind?
Actually, that's a good question because at first I thought I was going to mix up a different, like for example, I had in mind Crayolas and the Play-Doh and candles, like birthday candles, and I thought I was going to mix them up together and that I would create that childhood smell. But after trying a few out,
it actually kind of, it was too confusing. It wasn't clear so after that I thought, okay, no, I need to separate. I need to have clear, just one smell in each bottle, but then it's one after the other. So it becomes that
layering.
Oh, okay, this is childhood.
Yeah.
So it's layering but not mixing. So that was part of a fun part of the process. Then the images came afterwards. They came also. I worked the smells first. I also read a few researches on anemoia, and there's also a sense of, some smell bring memories of a past you didn't actually live. Yes. So I thought that was pertinent here. And then nostalgia and dissonance, and then I went into, okay, in fact, when you listen to nostalgic music, you kind of feel sad. Okay, so. And then I went into reading what's the difference between melancholia and nostalgia, and that's a tough one, as we all know. So that was more for the playlist itself that I put together. And I brought these little papers for people to write, this song reminds me of this period or instant. So, and I bought a few vinyls from my collection, actually, that just inspired these past lives that you may or may not have lived. And so the photos here are just a mix of personal stuff, but also historic ones, or this is a music reference. So I want people to be able to relate in some way, but also maybe to have a shared past life that we haven't actually lived experience. If I can say that.
A bottle is nothing without what's in it. Yes. So you invite people to make sense of it, right? Just as a closing, where can people find more of your work? Do you have an Instagram, a website?
I do. I'm on Instagram, or otherwise they can go read my master's, actually, thesis online if they want. It's about creativity and the music composers in Quebec. So, yeah. So I'm interested in creativity,
the Instagram
in fact.
Is
and nostalgia for me.
What's your Instagram handle?
Triggers. I don't remember.
We will put it right where you see this video, and the thesis as well when it's out.
Perfect.
Don't forget to read it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Thank you so much.